Brandon Staley's innovations revealed the next evolution of defense. Ladies and gentlemen, today we're going to be talking about Brandon Staley, Vic Fangio, and what you can expect from the New Orleans Saints defense in 2025. All right. So I've had a few people ask me to do a conversation like this where we're talking about Brandon Staley and this new defense the Saints are running, which of course is an offshoot of what Vic Fangio ran last year in Philadelphia. All right. Brandon Staley is the Vic Fangio disciple. Brandon Staley coached with Fangio in Chicago and Denver, and he holds a lot of those philosophies, and he's used them his entire career. So when you talk Fangio, you are kind of talking Staley, and when you're talking Staley, you're kind of talking Fangio. All right, so really quick. By the way, the backdrop, Alex Rollins, NFL. Really quick. Vic Fangio, 3-4 defense, 2 high safeties. The whole point of the defense, why it's so successful now, is that it is the perfect kryptonite to the Shanahan-style play-action, wide zone type offenses that we've seen, while simultaneously protecting itself from the deep ball over the top because of the 2 high safeties. So it also kind of helps out against what we saw 5-6 years ago with the Chiefs and the Bills, where it was all just deep balls down the field. All right, so at its base level, the defense will show you the same look every single play, pretty much. It will show you the same thing. Pre-snap. Post-snap, it'll change and it'll turn into a completely different defense. It's very difficult for an offense to know what's going on, especially when an offense runs play action, which a lot of the McVay, Shanahan, whatever, they all do the under center, play action, bootleg, right? Well, when the quarterback turns his back to the defense, and now the defense is completely different, it's very difficult for them to know what's going on, okay? As far as the 3-4, so I'm not going to get into the 4-eye techniques and all that stuff that the defensive line is going to be utilizing to beat double teams and wide zone runs, but know this. In this system, another philosophy is the safeties can come down and help in the run game. Because the safeties are playing high, they can get downhill quicker versus safeties playing in the box and then having to run backwards to go from a cover 1 to a cover 2 or whatever. Okay, so the safeties are important in the run game. A lot's happening. It's a very versatile defense. Let's go ahead and get into it. And then, of course, there's the pattern matching zone coverages, which we'll talk about, I'm sure, in this as well.
Quite like the ongoing, everlasting battle between offense and defense. Throughout all of history, both sides have continuously developed and evolved to find the next advantage to respond to the other side's most recent innovation. The evolution of the passing game has been the primary difference this past decade, and in 2020, offenses reached their historic apex with a record-breaking year. Teams across the NFL produced the most points per game, yards per game, passing touchdowns per game, and yards per pass. And defenses, especially because of no offseason, were ripped apart every single week. However, not every defense suffered. In fact, the Rams' defense actually improved. In Brandon Staley's first year as a defensive coordinator, he installed a scheme designed to counter the modern offense's newest evolutions. And in a year where defenses were hemorrhaging points, the Rams became the best defense in the league. They allowed just 4.5 yards per play, which was the lowest in the NFL, the fewest passing yards, just 17 passing touchdowns, the lowest by a lot, and they were one of the best run defenses in football.
So the defense is kind of an anomaly, because you'll see it utilizes like 2 high safety at the highest clip or whatever. You'll see that it uses a light front at the highest clip. You'll see that the penetration rates that the defensive line gets is usually low, but their like pressure rate or their like how much they blitz is low. But then all of a sudden you see, well, they actually are top 5 in run defense. So it does some things that you think it wouldn't do, which is kind of the point. It's so versatile and so flexible that what you may think is a weakness can actually be a strength and vice versa, which is the whole point of the defense, is to keep you. It's one of those things where it's so simple, it's actually complex.
It wasn't like the Rams drafted new dominant talent or poured a boatload of money into free agency, but it was Staley's vision for a new style on that side of the ball, a style that could very well be the next step in the evolution of defense. What were some of the innovations that he brought to the table, and how are they different from what we've seen before? For almost all of NFL...
Okay, man, I was just about to bring this up. All right, so the Seahawks defense was not... the NFL couldn't replicate the Seahawks defense because they couldn't replicate Earl Thomas. All right, their defense was highly predicated on Earl Thomas's ability to basically cover the entire field, go just sideline to sideline. And if you didn't have an Earl Thomas, defense kind of fell apart. The good thing about Fangio and Staley's defense is that you don't need super specific players. You obviously, if you have them, it's good. If you have Aaron Donald, it's good. If you have Jalen Ramsey, it's good. But it's not wholly reliant on, okay, I have to have Darrelle Revis on the outside. I have to have elite level lockdown cornerbacks in order for my blitz to get there. I need to have the best safety in the game in order to leave him on an island or whatever, right? So all you basically need for this defense is you need a run-stopping nose tackle. You need a secondary that understands the pattern matching zone. You need safeties who are willing to play in the run, who are willing to come downhill, hit, tackle, get in the run game because they have to. And you have to have athletic edge players who can either drop into coverage or rush the passer. That's what you need. Beyond that, it's all up to the players understanding the system. But you don't have to have the Earl Thomas. Like I said, if you have them, cool. But it's not reliant on it, which the Legion of Boom defense was wholly reliant on Earl Thomas.
History, defenses have tried to maintain a numbers advantage in the run game, which leaves mostly one-on-ones against the pass. Teams have always set out to stop the run first by allocating more resources closer to the line of scrimmage. And when Pete Carroll used this philosophy with the Legion of Boom, which deployed predominantly one-high cover 3 concepts, the rest of the NFL followed suit. But as time's gone on and rules have changed, offensive coaches and quarterbacks have just gotten too good at scheming up and exploiting these lighter coverages, which has led us closer and closer to the offensive explosion in...
The one high safety look obviously can get dominated by the deep ball, but it also gets dominated by the play action, bootleg, rollout, crossing stuff because it's just so predictable and it's so easy to pick them apart, which is what McVay and Shanahan do.
2020. Well, Staley's taken Carroll's philosophy and flipped that directly on its head. He drops a second safety deep so he can have one-on-ones in the run game and two-on-ones against the pass. He switched up the math to prioritize shutting down the pass first and worrying about the run second.
Yeah, so another important philosophy, and this is like separate from the defense. The other philosophy is that you want the offense to run the football. Because if you look at like EPA, you look at value per play and all that stuff and explosiveness and whatever, the passing play is always better than the run play. It's just inherently a better play. A completed pass is inherently better than a rush. The rush is relatively safe when it comes to what you want, as a defense, what you want to see an offense doing. So because they're in that 3-4, they are offering the offense an advantageous situation to run the football. And that's when that advantageous position can all of a sudden become not advantageous or disadvantageous, some would say, when they bring that safety in.
Makes sense, right? This year, the Rams played with a two-high safety look on 45% of their snaps, which was the most in the NFL. Two high safety looks are great against the pass, but even up the numbers in the run game, which is bad since you don't have enough defenders to fill each gap, and you don't have an extra guy free to hit the running back if everyone's blocked. However, despite seemingly ignoring the run game, the Rams still finished as a top 3 run defense. It doesn't matter how two high are if optimally ignore to hit the running back.
All right, now if you want to go into the next level of like understanding this, look up the 4-eye technique, which is what the ends are going to be asked to do. And that helps confuse this guard tackle double team situation and helps to beat the double team on these zones. So in a wide zone, basically the plan is for the offensive line to figure out which offensive lineman is doing the least during that first line, and then they move into that second line. But if they're confused, then it can slow it down, which is slow the play down, whatever, which is to give the safeties time to barrel down and make the tackle. So that's also important, but like I said, I'm not going to cover like all these techniques and stuff on the defensive line. So if you want to Google anything, Google the 4-eye technique for these ends.
If everyone's blocked. However, despite seemingly ignoring the run game, the Rams still finished as a top 3 run defense. It doesn't matter how fancy your coverages are if you're...
They're not going to show it here because it's a running play, but like if you look at this 2-high shell right here, pre-snap, well, what you'll see a lot if you're doing the all-22 during passing plays is that after the snap, the secondary is going to rotate, and it's going to rotate coverages, and it's going to completely change what the pre-snap look was. Now pretend the quarterback's back is turned while that disguise is happening, and you can see where it becomes very deceptive and very difficult to play against, even though for the most part you're seeing identical pre-snap reads. So the pre-snap read then becomes useless.
Doesn't matter how fancy your coverage is.
So let's talk about the Fangio Rams situation. So in the Fangio defense adopted by Saban for that game against the Rams in the Super Bowl after the Rams beat the Saints in the NFC Championship game, the Rams wanted to deceive and trick and put everyone in a blender in the box. Okay, they wanted everyone in the box to be confused by play action, the wide zone scheme, whatever. Fangio and Saban decided, or Saban by way of Fangio decided, okay, what if we're not even there? Like, what if our defensive line just does the same thing every time? And what if our safeties are back to where they're not in the blender? And by the time all the stuff happened, the misdirection and whatnot happens on the offense, no one's reacting to it. We're keeping everything in front of us. We're stopping the run. And then we're not biting on the play action. We're not biting on these crossing concepts. So then what are they going to do? And the Rams had nothing to do. Nothing they wanted to do worked. They couldn't run the ball. And then their play action, bootleg, crossing, short stuff didn't work. And they couldn't throw it deep because they had 2 safeties.
If you're constantly getting gouged up front. So how did they do it? 2-high safety looks like this one are essentially daring the offense to run the ball, and the Rams played super light fronts with super light boxes even on first downs. This looks like...
Yeah, so you're looking at this right here, you're thinking, okay, well, the Rams are in trouble here.
A front you'd see on third down, but it's 1st and 10 in a 1-score game in the 4th quarter, and the Rams have their 2-high safeties to defend the pass, just 3 down linemen, and just 5 guys in the box. The Giants have 5 blockers, so if they can block everybody, Devontae Freeman could just find daylight and theoretically keep running forever. Plus, if each guy in the box 1 gaps, which means they're filling just 1 gap, this B gap, for example, would be wide open, which is a death wish for any defense.
Yeah, now you're going to start getting the 1.5, 2 gap definitions and verbiage. Again, I'm not going to cover that here, but if you want to, further your understanding, something to Google.
But the Rams have several answers for this dilemma. First, they heavily involve their safeties in the run game to fill that extra gap, even though they're coming from depth. And second, they have one or multiple of their defensive linemen 2 gap, which means instead of
I'll let him go ahead.
shooting upfield into just 1, they'll strike the offensive lineman head on and try and control both gaps to either side.
So that's what Devon Godshaw is going to have to do. That's what his role will be.
You do lose some of the aggression from your linemen, who now aren't flying upfield, but you regain the gap advantage and hold the running back in the backfield until your safety can come join the party. These 3-down defensive fronts are one of the calling cards of Staley's defensive scheme, but they're not like the typical 3-4 fronts that have been in the NFL forever. They heavily borrow from the college game instead.
So this guy knows what's going on. So it's crazy because, so again, you're looking at like a 4-4-0-4 front, a tight front, however you want to phrase it. The person who created that was Chip Kelly, or helped create it was Chip Kelly. And the way he created it, or why he created it, was because Chip Kelly's offenses were dominating in college when he was at Oregon. So other colleges began to run his system. So he had to figure out a way to stop his own system. So Oregon created or popularized the tight front, 404 front, which is just the 404 is just your ends playing the 4-eye technique, and then the defensive tackle playing a 0, which means he's lined head up against the center. So he's going straight on into the center, jamming him up, and then he can kind of move to play both gaps. That's what 404 is. Okay, and then the 4s are obviously the 4-eye techniques on the outside. Okay, now something to remember too. I was going to show you with this play right here, because I know a lot of you are commenting this. Okay, and it's okay if you commented it, but this play right here, how many of you commented and said, "Well, yeah, of course, of freaking course, the Rams can do this. They have Aaron Donald.
The running back.
Aaron Donald makes his tackle right here. Like, of course, that's not Aaron Donald.
Until your safety can.
That is not Aaron Donald, right? So this looks like something where it's like, okay, yeah, Aaron Donald, of course, is going to dominate 65, move him out of the way, throw him down, make the tackle, no problem.
Until your safety can come.
But that's not Aaron Donald.
These 3-down defensive fronts are one of the calling cards of Staley's defensive scheme, but they're not like the typical 3-4 fronts that have been in the NFL
exact thing
forever.
Right there.
They heavily borrow from the college game instead. Staley uses the tight front, which
there
is
you
barely
go.
seen in the NFL,
Yeah.
but is quite common in college. Instead of spreading the 3 defensive linemen out and letting linebackers fill the inside gaps, the D-line condenses inside to force runs out to the perimeter. Notice how Michael Brockers and Aaron Donald are lined up in the B gaps in what are called 4-eye techniques.
Yep. Damn, am I on a different level or what?
Which means they're on the inside shoulder of the tackles. And the nose tackle Joseph Day is lined up directly over the center. With the linebacker Micah Kaiser, we have both A gaps and B gaps filled, which forces the run outside where the faster defenders are waiting. You can see Joseph Day and Donald 2-gapping, and the safety Taylor Rapp flying down a little late to help out. One of the reasons this style is so popular in college is its ability.
It's the RPO. So that's what Oregon ran, was the RPO. So that's what this front was designed to stop. Let's see if he says it.
To shut down the RPO run
God, dog!
pass option. And just so we're on the same page, a run pass option is a play that can turn into either a run or a pass after the snap depending on the movement of the conflict defender the quarterback's reading. In 1-high safety defenses, like the Chargers are running, a linebacker is responsible for this B gap, as opposed to having a defensive lineman there like the Rams do. Wentz can easily read him since the backer.
So, in the 1-high, I know we already kind of talked about this, but in a 1-high type defense, where you're stacking the box, this is like the blender, okay? So the blender is, okay, we'll put all your defenders in this box. As an offense, we're going to create deception and we're going to confuse them with play action and motion and whatever, and then we're just going to throw where you're not. And that was it, right? That was what McVay and Shanahan and all these offenses started doing. And there's so many now that do it. I mean, you're talking about, like, it's not, I always just say them, but it's LaFleur, it's Stefanski, it's Kevin O'Connell. The list goes on. It's Clint Kubiak, but Zach Robinson, Zach Taylor. But if there's no one here, who are you confusing, right? If no one is there to be tricked by motion or play action, and that's another thing that another philosophy that you'll see a lot with Fangio and Staley is the middle of the field is empty. There's no one in the middle of the field. And so there's no, like, this blender doesn't exist. So imagine you're running motions, you're running play action, you're running bootlegs, you're doing all this, but there's no one there to get tricked. It's all for naught.
Either has to run to cover his gap or hang back to cover the slant.
Oh, another part too. Well, this is a linebacker, so it's a little different. But when you're playing cover one, so you have a safety. If the safety has to backtrack to get into a 2-high set, let's say you're disguising something, the Fangio-Staley defense, the design is, well, it's easier for a safety to come up than it is to run backwards. It's easier to play defense in front of you than it is to turn around and run backwards to get into a spot. So even if you're trying to disguise something in cover one, it's easier to disguise it in cover 2 because the safety is in a better position.
So when Wentz sees him filling his B gap, even though the O-line is blocking for a run, Wentz pulls the ball and easily hits the slant that's now come open. When we go back to our Dolphins example, this is actually an RPO, but now there's no conflict on the player tasked to cover the B gap. If the Rams weren't playing this type of front and defense, Micah Kiser would be bumped over to the right and the nickel cornerback Troy Hill would be assigned to defend the
they're in the blender, but now they're not in the blender at all.
B gap and guard the tight end Mike Gesicki. You can see Tua look right at Hill at the snap, but since he's not in conflict, he can just focus on Gesicki, so Tua's read tells him to hand the ball off to the back, who's headed right into the teeth of the defense. Staley shouldn't have been able to pull any of this off without having his run defense gashed on the regular, but the fact that he did allowed his pass defense to be absolutely lights out. It was really smart of him to implement these fronts knowing he had Aaron Donald, who's almost like 2 guys, and utilize the fact he had Jalen Ramsey, who...
So when you are doing this with, let's just say, regular players, it's good, all right? It's a good scheme. But just like any scheme, when you then put in really, really good players, that turns it into the best defense in the NFL, similar to the offenses. Like the Chiefs, if the Chiefs had the 3 best wide receivers in the NFL, all of a sudden their offense goes from good to elite, the greatest of all time, right? So don't get it mistaken that having Jalen Ramsey or having Aaron Donald isn't important. It is important if you want to be the number 1 defense in the NFL, right? But the defense can exist without these players, whereas the Legion of Boom defense couldn't exist without Earl Thomas.
Who can shut down anybody in football. Not only did he move Ramsey all over...
Man, damn it. This guy, Alex Rollins, this guy is in my head. I was just about to say, another good part about this defense is it's so versatile and flexible. When you have someone like Jalen Ramsey, you can move him all over the field. And Brandon Staley did. Brandon Staley moved him wherever he wanted. A guy who you may see used in the same way as Alontae Taylor, not so much on like leaving him on an island or whatever, but I wouldn't be surprised at all if Alontae was, you'd see him lined up at safety because he's barreling down to play the run. Oh, now he's lined up at corner. Oh, now he's back. Oh, now he's here, because he's just such a unique player, and he's better in that, like, whatever, like you want him creating havoc. It's what he's good at. So I wouldn't be surprised at all if he utilized him. I mean, we've seen, like the Eagles last year, right? Like Cooper DeJean was so important in stopping the run.
For the formation, but he often put him one-on-one with the offense's best wideout and pushed even more numbers in coverage towards the rest of the receivers. Staley put the most stress and responsibility on the shoulders of these 2 GOATs, which allowed everybody on the defense to be successful. When teams use 3-by-1, or here even 4-by-1 formations, Rams shut down the backside so Staley could push everybody else towards the formation strength. The Rams are running cover 6 buzz, which is cover 3 with a weak side safety rotation, and Ramsey's matched one-on-one with the backside receiver, so instead of dropping their rotating safety into this weak hook, he can turn away from that side and bring his attention to the slot. Quarterbacks attempted the 3rd fewest deep passes against the Rams thanks to their excess numbers and coverage, but also because of how they attacked up front, just rushing 4. Of course, it helps having Aaron Donald, but what's really important is knowing how offenses are going to design their protections to stop him, and Staley certainly knows. The Cowboys have just 5 in protection, and here the...
Yeah, something else that's important about this defense, or kind of this style of defense, I guess, is that it is so amiable. It is so, like, you have to be ready to change, pivot, adjust on the play, on the day, on the week. And that's what Staley's going to do. Staley will, what I'm telling you right now is the basics, I guess, the foundational, like the understanding of just, okay, this is how it works. But you may see a completely different defense in week 1 than you do in week 2 or week 3 or week 4, because the shell of it is so simple. But you can, because it's so simple, it's all of a sudden becomes very modular, where you can just change a component here. Oh, now the entire thing is different, right? So it's like, it's never going to be the exact same.
Rams are showing a 4-man front. The Cowboys are pretty much forced to half slide, which is like a 3-man zone to Donald so they can get a double team on him, so that means the backside's in man. So Staley is Samson Ebukam drop into coverage, which essentially wastes Tyron Smith in protection.
Right, so this is kind of what I'm talking about, where he knows, at this point he has seen, all right, they're doubling Aaron Donald, they're going this way, I'm going to show this 4 front, and I'm going to, because he knows that Smith's going to look to block him, and he knows if he does that, this gap will be open for 59 to come in on the blitz.
And sends
that's what's about to happen.
Micah Kiser on a stunt, which now gives Donald the one-on-one, which he eats for breakfast.
It gives him the one-on-one. Why? Because 73 has to, he's a free man, so he has to leave the double team in order to pick him up, which then creates a one-on-one. What have we heard this training camp with Brandon Staley and Brian Brzee and Chase Young? He's getting them in one-on-ones. This is how you get them in one-on-ones. You get them in these situations they want to be in order for them to win. And we know Brian Brzee and players like that, that's where they want to be. They want to be in one-on-one against the pass because Brian Brzee had 8 sacks last year. Like, that's what he wants to do. So this is how Staley will do that. Now, he wouldn't do this against a team that's not doing what the Cowboys are doing in this play. This is a per play, per opponent, per game situation.
The Rams are still sending just 4, but have schemed up a good matchup for Donald without sending extra guys on a blitz, which would have weakened their pass defense. The Rams sacked the quarterback
This always confuses people too. Like you hear analysts talk about this all the time, where they'll say, oh, well, it's a heavy blitz or something like that because they see a linebacker coming down. But a lot of the times those like heavy blitzes are really just sending 4. But it's just doing it in a creative way to where, to the naked eye, I guess, it's like, oh my God, it's an all-out blitz. But in reality, it's not.
Second most in the NFL, while blitzing at just a league average rate. And their coverages, combined with that pressure, force quarterbacks to check the ball down consistently.
And why does this defense want you to check down? Because because now you're in front of the entire defense. The entire defense is standing right in front of you waiting for you to check it down. And then they just get downhill and make the play. So now you've seen how this paradox of, all right, it's a 3-4 front, it's, advantageous look for the offense, but you can't run against it. They're only sending 4, but they're getting to the passer because they're creating these unique one-on-one situations.
Defense had the lowest opposing average depth of target, which is how far down the field a receiver is targeted on average. But
average depth of target, also known as ADOT, is one of the advanced analytics we look at throughout the year.
Also had the 3rd lowest yards after the catch. And Staley showed
Why would the yards after the catch be low? Because the defenders, they're not chasing after the players. They're not 5 yards behind. They're not. It's because they're right in front of them.
Advanced understanding of how to scheme against any problem offenses could present, even providing several unique ideas for shutting down the RPO beyond the alignment we already talked about. Here's a great example against the Cardinals
it's a perfect example of how they're stopping the run with a unique way.
Love to run RPOs, where the Rams have their 2 high safety shell with the weak safety ready to come down if it's a run. We can see one of the issues with 2 high safety looks, where since this second safety is coming from so far away, the Cardinals' 3 receivers can run some sort of smoke screen or an RPO slant if this backer crashes for the run. So Staley drops his end into that slant window, which holds the tackle, and rushes the backer who was going to be the one in conflict. When Kyler Murray reads the slant RPO window, he sees the end falling back, so he hands it off. But since the tackle and guard push outside due to the initial alignment, the backer...
He's answering both questions, basically. In this situation, Kyler's only reading one person, and he's hoping, all right, well, I'm reading this one person because he can't do both jobs. He can't protect against the run and the pass. Staley is saying, true, but I'm going to disguise it to where the guy you are reading is answering one of the questions and the guy you aren't reading is answering the other question. So this guy he's answering the pass question. He's got coverage. He's dropping back in coverage. So Kyler's like, all right, the pass is answered. I have to hand it off. But the run is also answered. Because it is disguised, Kyler doesn't realize, and even if he does, it doesn't matter. I mean, I guess he could check out of it, but he doesn't realize that both of the options are already covered. There is no actual read, right? And that's the pre-snap confusion, is that there isn't a read. Reading it pre-snap is fruitless because you're seeing the same thing over and over and over again. So what you're reading doesn't really matter. He read this correct, but it didn't matter. And if he read it wrong, it didn't matter. Right? If he read it wrong, this guy's there to break up the pass. If he reads it right, which he did, this guy's there to break up the run.
Who was going to be the one in conflict? When Kyler Murray reads the slant RPO window, he sees the end falling back, so he hands it off. But since the tackle and guard push outside due to the initial alignment, the backer flies in and picks up a tackle for a loss. After Staley's first season with the Rams and as an NFL coordinator ended, he was immediately hired as the head coach of the Chargers across town, where he'll implement his innovative scheme with a completely different roster. Will it work for the Chargers, and will the rest of the NFL adopt it in 2021? Not necessarily. Donald and Ramsey are two of the best players in the entire league, and between Donald's ability to dominate from the interior line and Ramsey's ability to lock anybody up one-on-one, those aren't things you can find just anywhere. The Chargers do have several beasts of their own, like Joey Bosa and Derwin James, but their skill sets are very different and won't translate in the same fashion. A football scheme is like a gigantic puzzle where every last piece has to fit together. If one doesn't fit, NFL offenses will identify that piece and relentlessly.
So what's interesting is this was obviously made before he goes to the Chargers. What's funny is like the focus is on Staley with, will Staley's defense take over the league? Well, whatever. A couple years later, look what defense is taking over the league. His brain is Staley's, but the guy getting the shine is Vic Fangio. And it is Fangio's defense. I'm not saying Staley should get the credit, not Fangio. But to say like, this won't work. Look at Brandon Staley. Look at the Chargers. Well, all you got to do is look at Philadelphia. All you got to do is look at Fangio and realize like, damn, this is the defense that ended up taking over the league. This is exactly what took over the league and is currently the preferred style in the NFL. Now, will it always be like that? No. The NFL is cyclical. Offenses don't stay the same. Defenses don't stay the same. It's not just run this and then you win. And there is an onus on the defensive players. This defense will fall apart if the players do not understand it. We saw Fangio, I don't want to say fail, but get run out of Miami because the players just did not buy into the system. They didn't understand it. We saw Philadelphia last year struggle. Philadelphia struggled at the beginning of the year. Brand new defense, complex, a lot on the players, a lot of pattern matching, read this, read that, a lot on the safeties, a lot on the defensive line, a lot on the secondary. It takes a second to get used to the Fangio defense. Fangio defenses are always better in the back end of the year because the players are more used to what they're being asked to do. You go from, like I said, Cooper DeJean, who at the beginning of the year, whatever, at the end of the year, damn, is this guy the best defensive player in the league? Like this is like you go look at the Eagles in weeks 1, 2, 3, 4, first 4 games. Weren't they 2-2? You look at them in the first 4 weeks, and then you look at them at the end of the year, completely different. So the Saints team, there's 2 things you need to watch with Staley. Are the players right? Do we have the correct players to do this? Like, can Godshaw do what he's being asked to do? Can the safeties play the run like they have to play it? Can Brian Brzee or Chase Young or Carl Granderson or whoever, can they get to the quarterback on these one-on-ones? Or are Chase Young and Carl Granderson athletic enough to do this, to play on the outside in this scheme? Does Kool-Aid McKinstry and Isaac Yiadom and Quincy Riley, do they understand the pattern matching zone coverage? That's what you have to watch for. And if it's like, okay, they can do it, but you can see they're getting confused, well, maybe it's just they need to learn the system. Maybe they'll get better over time. If you're watching and you're like, Devon Godshaw is getting destroyed. He's not covering any gaps, much less 2 gaps. Well, then okay, the Saints probably have to upgrade at nose tackle. Same thing. Okay, well, Brian Brzee is getting these one-on-ones, but I'm watching the tape. I'm watching the All-22. He's not winning. Okay, well then you probably need to get a better player there who can take advantage of those one-on-one. So it's a multi-step process as far as evaluating how this is going to work.
Exploited, and that scheme will be quickly phased out. Staley's defense will be copied by other teams next season, but it takes a lot for an organization to uproot their entire plan and rejigger their roster to fit these.
Yeah, I mean that's another thing too. Like this is a totally different thing for the Saints team. And yeah, there's some new players. You know, there's some players they've brought in, like I said, Godshaw and some of the draft picks and Justin Reed, and sure. But this is the first year, you know, so there is a mismatch of pieces they've brought in to do this specific thing, and then also players who are here who are just kind of left over. And that's why when you see Chase Young get that contract, you have to assume that Brandon Staley likes what he brings to this defense. Otherwise, you don't get that contract. It's not as simple as, oh, well, Chase Young has blank pressure rates. Okay, cool, contract. Or why did Chase Young get that contract? He has blank number of sacks. It also is what does he have that fits this system? That's part of it too.
New ideas and concepts. Staley was ballsy enough to do it in his first season as a coordinator with no offseason.
How about that coaching staff, huh? Kevin O'Connell, Brandon Staley, and Sean McVay.
Proved that there is a way to slow down these modern offenses. Will bits and pieces of his scheme be copied league-wide, or will teams go all out and install the entire thing? That's the question. The 2020 season was a non-stop offensive fireworks show of epic proportions, the likes that history's never seen before. But for every offensive innovation, defenses have been evolving right along with them, and Staley's innovations proved to be the next rung in a long ladder of defensive evolution. Offensive coaches are already studying and trying to solve what he brought to the table this past season. So for Staley and the rest of the defenses in the NFL, 2021 will be just the next chapter in the evolution of football.
I think what I think is going to end up happening is you're going to go back to this power run game, because it just seems like that's where the league is headed. And this like wide zone, Shanahan, I think this is the end of that. And so you do have to kind of wonder, all right, well, because this is like 5 years after all this has taken place. So are offenses willing to say, all right, we're not doing the bootleg play action zone. Like we're not doing that as much anymore. Now we're shifting to a new style, which would then force defenses to shift to a new style. All right, remember when the defense is shifted to smaller, more athletic defenders to cover the pass, then it became more advantageous for the run. And then all of a sudden you started seeing teams that could run the ball be more successful and more willing to run the ball. So it swings and cycles. So, you know. All right, ladies and gentlemen, this was a master class in what to expect with Brandon Staley and this Fangio system in 2025 and moving forward. Hope everything in here. I know some of the stuff's confusing. You know, the gap numbers and the techniques. It really is simple. Like the techniques really just dictate either where you're lining up on your counterpart, or like what shoulder you're lined up on, or where gap you're filling. But you know, you don't have to know all that stuff to understand this defense. All right, so don't get bogged down in all that. Just understand the philosophies or whatever. If you have any questions, drop them down in the comments below. This is a really good video. Shout out Alex Rollins. Alex Rollins NFL. Obviously, his video link is in the description. Go check him out. Tell him the face of the franchise sent you. But yeah, I mean, this is good stuff, and he nailed a lot of the points that I wanted to talk about. He nailed. So this was a great video to pick to do this. I'm glad I did this one. I almost did a Fangio one. But I said, we'll go straight to the source. All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next video.